type of data, how the data, what was the differentiate between the data and information, what are the exact types which are used in the marketing research. So let's begin with the definition of data. So basically what the data stands for. Hello? A very good morning to all. In today's session, we are all going to learn what is all about the data processing. So let's begin with the definition of data or the introduction about the data. So let's begin with that. What is data? So basically, data refers or implies as a collection of facts or ideas or any figures or observations which are mainly used for the analysis or decision making purposes or process. It could be numerical based, it could be a non-numerical based, or even the fact or the assumptive statements, which could be termed as data. So it can be numerical. You can take plenty of examples like weight, height, any number of the students in a session, etc. And it could be a non-numerical way, or it could be a color of a car or a color of an eye, etc. So there are basically a plenty of examples that could be described the numerical or the non-numerical in a broad perspective. So the numerical data that stands for the number of students in a particular class, or a count of defect in a product, or any of the number of goals that scored a particular player has scored in a chess game, or any other matches in the school competition, in the college competition, etc. And the non in case of the non-numerical data, the color of a someone here, the customer's perspective, how the customer satisfaction level, and what would be the type of a car that when someone drives, any taste of a particular fruit, that also comes under the non-numerical data. So this is a distinguish between the data and information. So data is all shows or refers to a kind of facts, figures, or ideas, or opinions, etc. In particular statistics. When we talk about information, it's all about the result, that how a particular researcher is analyzed the or interpreted the data in her or his research study. The data is always called a raw data. It is an unorganized way that how the researcher convert to unorganized data to the organized way. But when we talk about the information, it has a conceptual, you can say, information or a description of the, you can say, a data which could be used for the results. Next, we can talk about the data is without information. So, as data is always based on the numerical way, where the exact figures is to be written down. But in case of the information, that such data is mainly used for making up a proper or a meaningful or the impactful decision making process. Data could be qualitative, could be quantitative. So when we talk about the qualitative, we always talk about the numerical based system. But when we talk about the qualitative, it always we talk about the description based research. But when we talk about in case of information, we always talk about any of the idea that you are talking about, any of the fact that you're talking about, any of the results or outcome that you're talking about, that too becomes the information. For example, the customer, 90% customers are satisfied with the new Lux product. That is the information. Product price comparison, if a particular researcher is comparing the price level of one product of the company with another company, so what would be the information or the description is to be written down, that exactly called the information. Let's take a very normal example. We can talk up, that is the website traffic changes as well. So when we talk about in case of data, the examples would be the number of website visitors. If you visit to any of the government portal website, you can easily look up the data that how many visitors is visited on this site. So that's called data. Individual customer survey responses, any product price, when you came to know the price of a new product, that is 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees for a wallet, it becomes data for you. Now we can come up to the distinguish between the primary and the secondary data, which is one of the major type of data. So when we talk about the primary data, so the data which has been gathered by conducting the original research and investigation, that is the primary data. But when we talk about the secondary data, the information and the data which has already been gathered by other person, that is called the secondary data. When we talk about the primary data, it always gives a particular researcher a fresh and original information, a transformation when it comes to a newly researched study. But when we talk about the secondary data, it provides historical information or data regarding any, you can say, area or any other research topics or the titles or the new research titles. That becomes the secondary data. When we talk about, in case of another aspect about the information, a type of information that becomes a qualitative information comes under the primary data, but quantitative information when it comes under secondary data, when you are consider the data of the profit and loss account, all the financial statements accounts, and used for analyzing that statements, that comes under, and using in your own study, it becomes a secondary data for you. Primary data has a limited coverage, but the secondary data has a wider coverage. You get plenty of data on the online sources regarding any of the, you can say, subject area. Primary data consumes more time, cost, and efforts as well, whereas the field work is more and more in case of the primary data. You have to visit to the respondents or the participants, or instead of visiting to any individually basis, you can easily refer to an online, you can say, survey, which also consumes more time, cost, and efforts as well. When we talk about the secondary, it consumes less time, cost, and efforts. Primary data is always ensures more and more accuracy, validity, and reliability. But secondary data, it always lacks the validity and reliability of data, because we don't know the data which are available on the online sources, whether that data are actually reliable or valid for the researcher, or the researcher actually, you can say, termed as valid and reliable of such sources which they will use in their own his or her study. So that becomes the secondary data. So, but when we talk about the primary data as compared to the secondary data, primary data ensures more accuracy and validity and reliability, because after all, the researcher is collecting the data from the participants and respondents, and accordingly, whatever the data they will get for the analysis and interpretation, that would be more accurate, valid, and reliable, because that data termed as the original data which will be used his or her own research study. So these are the sources of the secondary data, that how a particular researcher collect the data from different sources, and what would be the sources where they can collect the data They are the ones that organizational declaration, any organizational reports which has been declared on the online platforms, official documents, any of the official documents which has been disclosed by the organizations or companies or researcher is willing to research on, that to be available online as well. Statistical report, there are plenty of national survey organization, there are statistical organizational, central statistics organizations where the plenty of data sheets are available in the PDF formats, are available in their website, so they can also term as a source of the secondary data. Scholarly articles on database, that when we talk about any of the journals which always talk about, any of the Google scholars we can talk about, where the plenty of articles are always available at a free of cost, anyone can download, which is related to your research topic, which is also termed, and you can use that data in your own study, which is also called as a source of the secondary data. Next is books are also the one of the source. Peer-reviewed journal articles, the articles which has been published online in any of the peer-reviewed journals, which that also been considered as a source of the secondary data. Next one is magazines. Of course, magazines is also the one of the source of the secondary data. Next one is library. Libraries are also the one of the major source of such type, because if anyone would like to visit to the library and open up the various digital libraries, they can easily get the source of data relevant to the research topics, and they can easily use it in their own research. Diaries, it could be talk about the personal diaries, it could be talk about the corporate diaries, which where the data is available online, and you can easily use either qualitative and quantitative as well in your report. Government data, let's take an example. If the crime report data a particular researcher needed, they can easily visit to the crime branch bureau website, and there are plenty of the crimes in India which has been occurred, and the statistical data is available in the PDF format. Just download, use it for your own research, which also termed as a source of the secondary data. So these are the sources, around 10 sources of the secondary data where the particular researcher can be used. Next one is the primary data, that means the sources of the primary data. It being classified into three main approaches that are objectives, objectivist or the quantitative approach, qualitative approach or the mixed research approach. So when we talk about the quantitative approach, it also being classified into three main categories: the survey, specific observation, and the results from experiment. So when we talk about the survey, we always talk about the personal questioning, the personal interaction with the respondents, a telephonic conversation from one-to-one participants, questionnaires, either offline or the online questionnaires, either you can do through emails or any of the electronic forms like WhatsApp, Telegram, Yahoo Messenger, etc., and the mail survey. You can easily email that link, survey of a link, and just uh, uh, you can say email to the respective respondents. So these are the main categories of the surveys, where the how the survey is to be done through these modes only. When we talk about the qualitative is also classified into three main aspects. The first one is the focus group discussion, where a particular topic has been given to a group and they just open discussion among all, where the particular researcher will get all the necessary information that could be used and considered as in data and information in their researches. Next one is in-depth interviews, where one-to-one in-depth interviews to be conducted, or a group interviews is to be conducted so that the researcher will gather more and more information about the topic. Next one is projective methods, where the equipment is to be used and accordingly the particular information or data is to be collected from the participants. So these are the sources of the primary data where the researchers could use accordingly or according to their requirements. And the mixed research approach is a combination of both, either quantitative and qualitative. The researcher will use the both approaches, and it can use any of the approaches or any of the aspects of these two in their own researches. Now we can come up to the what is exactly the data processing. Data processing is an intermediary stage. It is called a stage where the particular data, when a particular researcher has collected the data and interpreting the data. So what would be the stage where it comes to how it could process and reach to a stage of results. That stage, that intermediary stage, is called the data processing. How the data is to be presented, is to be coded when it after collecting the data, and how it will interpret it. That stage is called the intermediary stage, and that stage becomes the data processing. So a researcher who gather the data in the form of the questionnaires or interview schedules or any of the field notes, data sheets, it always covers a large volume of research variables, either dependent or independent variables, and such variables are always a part of the preliminary research plan. And once they will set up, then automatically the data processing methods will also be considered before collecting the data by the researcher. So processing of data is always requires advanced planning, that how the data is to be collected, and once the data has been collected, how the data is to be processed to turn into a tabulation, how it could be analyzed, how it could be interpreted. That advanced planning is to be done by the researcher in advance, and whatever the aspect covered in that planning, it could be to identify the variables, how what would be the hypothesis statements, whether is there any relationship between the variables or not, or accordingly the researcher could look at the research hypothesis. Basically, there are various steps in processing of data, which could be editing, coding, classification, and tabulation. So these are the four main steps which actually exist in the processing of data. So let's begin with the editing of data. So what is editing of data? Editing of data is a process that how a researcher is to examine the collection of the raw data, either through the surveys, either through the questionnaires, so that any of the errors, any of the omission would comes in their way. A particular researcher can easily edit, can easily rectify, easily correct whenever possible and whenever the need arises. And that's called editing of data. As a matter of the fact, editing is always involves a careful examination of the completed questionnaires or the schedules that a researcher has made up for conducting his own study. Editing is almost done to ensure that the whatever the data has been collected are actually are accurate and consistent with the other facts which has been gathered by the researcher. It properly tabulated, entered wherever the sheet has been given to them as soon as possible when complete, and then well arranged so that the coding and the tabulation process would goes on. So data editing is a process that how a researcher is to review and modify the data so that the accuracy, consistency, and the completeness qualities or characteristics could be seen, and it involves a process of detecting and correcting the errors wherever the possible way the researcher can do. And if he and she can found any of the errors or any of the inconsistencies in the data, the researcher can easily do it for the further process of analysis, and that actually called the editing of data. And this process either could be done through manually, or it could be through done automated process. But somehow, if a particular researcher could do manually, it would be a crucial and a complex process when it comes to the lengthy calculations, when it comes to the large data available. So the manual wouldn't be possible, then the automated editing would be possible so that it could ensure the reliable research outcomes. These are the examples of data editing. Let's take a particular researcher has to fix up the inconsistency in the following statement, in a survey statement or the question. So a survey question asks about the annual income. So one respondent fill it $50,000 while another fill it as 50,000. So the editor or the researcher would standardize this in a consistent format like $50,000 or 50,000. So this is a way the inconsistency the researcher can fix up according to the responses of the respondent, which is called a pilot study, so that whatever the consistencies happen in the data, that can easily be rectified and modified in its data process. Next one is addressing missing data. So in a particular statement, if any data has been missing, so the researcher can easily identify before it goes for the analysis or coding or in the tabulation process. So if any of the data is missing, the researcher can easily mark it or enter the column as not applicable, so that the missing frequency can easily be identified through this particular, you can say, option. So a survey on preferences asks for a reason for not using the product. So this is service belongs of the consumer preferences, that asking the reasons that why you are not using the product. Some respondents has leave the question blank, and the editor has input a missing value based on other data points or based on the other responses of the respondents, and mark it it's not applicable. So if a particular respondent is not ready to answer, make a missing frequencies and just mark it not applicable immediately. So this is how the data editing is to be done in terms of the situation when such situations comes arrive. Next one is correcting errors. So any of the database or any of the Excel sheet has been shown to you which contains a customer address with a typo. Like say some of the respondent has, you can see, written up the street instead of street. So automatically editor would easily identify the errors and immediately modify so that it would ensure the accurate record keeping. Next one is validating data ranges. So as the data ranges, it could be 100 to 200, 200 to 500, or 500 to 600, or any of the variables contains any number. That is called the validate data ranges. For example, the database tracks the number of children a customer has. So if any of the entry indicates 500 children, that definitely it's an error. It's something is lacking or something is wrongly entered or wrongly entry has been done by the respondent, which has been indicating 500 children's, a customer has, which is not possible. So, which is an outlier and likely an error. So, editor would investigate and correct the entry and making it more and more realistic value, because a customer never have 500 children. So there is something mistaken error exists in this particular value, and immediately the researcher can modify in an Excel sheet. Next is standardizing units of measurement. So if a survey collects the weights in kilogram and pounds, that is lbs and kg, the editor would convert all weights to a consistent units in, that is in kg, for analysis. So if any of the researcher has willing to do a survey and just to collect the weights in kilograms, so definitely editor would conduct all units into the kg for the data analysis purposes. So this is a few examples, so that you will get to know that how the researcher will edit the data in the following situations. Next one is the stages of data editing. So basically, when we talk about the stages, there are two main stages when you talk about the editing of data. That is the field editing, and the next one is the central editing. When we talk about the field editing, it always implies or reveals a process of modifying a specific data fields, like renaming a field. Here we are talking about the field is a content, is a subjects we can talk about, like name, address, occupation, income level, etc. So obviously when we field editing means when you are entering the main variables or the very specific data fields, so automatically field editing means that if some name has been wrongly entered, so definitely you can remain that field, you can remain that variable. You can also change the data type, you can also change the design of the size of the fonts, the font, or you can also change the format of the font, and you can also adjust what would be the sizes of the main variable and the data of that variables. So that is called the field editing. It could be done through various contests, like including that. You can also see such field editing data reports, data base management, where a large data has been you can say managed on an Excel sheet, and any of the field editing is required. Any naming of the field, renaming naming of the field is missing. Any remaining of the field is to be done. You have to change the data type, whether it could be done at a nominal way, nominal data, or the ratios, etc., that you can done, and that exactly called the field editing. For example, in a data report, you might change the order value to average order value, or that means if anyone wants only the value, or anyone wants the average order value, so automatically, or anyone wants convert a number into the percentage, that stands called the field editing. If I want percentage and you are working on the data, or you are working on the processing of data, so automatically if I want percentage, so the person who is doing processing the data or editing the data, they immediately convert that numbers into a percentage, and that's called the field editing. So these are the examples of the field editing, renaming the fields in a particular data report. Mostly, like in a particular company, we always, or in the banks, there is a customer ID is to be done, but in the companies, it remains to client ID. So these are differences, that how you can rename the fields according to the situations, or according of understanding the nature of the business. So the data report changing the display name of the field, for example, renaming customer ID to client ID. So you're renaming the variable, that is the customer ID, to client ID. Next one is changing data type. You can convert a numerical field to a percentage or a text field to URL. So automatically, if any you want to change any of the any of the data which turns into a number, numerical number into a percentage, or any text field, or you can turn into a URL. So definitely that to be done as field editing. Adjusting aggregation, it's in a particular data report. If the researcher wants to change how a metric is calculated, how the average is to be calculated, if the sum has been calculated, so automatically instead of sum you can change the word average. So automatically you can switches the words that what exactly you wanted in a particular data, whether it could be the sum of the data or the average of the data, the medium of the data. If I want the mode, so automatically I will switch the calculation or estimation part from sum to median. So immediately the median of the whole data would comes out immediately in a seconds in an Excel sheet or any of the statistical softwares. Next one is modifying formulas. In the calculated field, changing the formula used to drive its value. So automatically, if any of the formula which has been used by you and you want to change the formula, which is the software will use it, so definitely you can use that, or you can edit that field, or you change by changing the formula. Next one is customizing bin definitions. So in a data report or a data cases, you can a particular researcher can easily adjust that how the data is grouped into bins or categories. For example, if I'm talking about the gender are classified into 3 or 4 categories like male, female, others, or transgenders. So automatically, this is how the data is could be to be grouped into the categories. When it comes to the main variable, a main field, that's called gender. Central editing. Now we can talk about the next stage is central editing. It involves reviewing all the completed forms or the questionnaires at a central location only after the field work has been finished. And the central editing is to be done by the expertise person or an expertise editor or a small team involved who are preparing that forms or questionnaires, and the central editing is almost reviewing of all that completed or filled forms or questionnaires. And if any of the errors or the omissions or any missing data or is to be involved in that filled forms and questionnaires, that single editor or a small team will do that so that they can ensure others there is a consistency in data, you can say processing. So this stage will build after the field editing, and this editing it always achieve a high level of data quality, and then they can go for the further analysis steps. The purpose, the main purpose of the central editing is to identify, it's to correct the errors, any of the inconsistencies occurred, any of the missing data has been occurred after the field editing work has been finished. Next one is timing. It occurs after all forms and questionnaires which to be returned to the central office. Now the question arises is what are the key activities involved in the central editing? The first one is error correction. So what would be the error correction is to be done by the single editor or the small team. Missing data. So if any of the missing data is available or is mentioned in the field or completed forms and questionnaire, then our small team or the single editor task is to correct the data or to contact that respondent and just refill that questionnaires again so that the missing frequency would turn into a filled data. Data consistency, when the work has been done by the small team or single editor, it always ensures that all the data is consistent and complete. There should not be any missing data involved in it. So if any of the missing figures or data or information involved in the filled forms and questionnaires, the researcher will call up the respondent and the respondent then again fill the missing data. And that data will be recorded in the Excel sheet for the further analysis of data. Next one is clarity. Clarity is always is should have exist in their responses because unattempted responses, ambiguous answers or responses will not be accepted, and that was the main reason. If any of the ambiguous answers or responses involved in it, they will call the respondent and again re-ask the you can say the question and again the answers to be written down by him or her. Obviously, it was done by the single editor or a small team, but in the central office. No branches, the central headquarters. Example you can talk about of this central editing if a survey asks about the age. One respondent accidentally records their birth rate instead of their age. Then automatically central editor would correct the entry to reflect that respondent age based on the birth date. So this is the work the central editor would could do when it comes to correcting or modifying the data. So this is how if any of the you can say the respondent have answered the income level instead of occupation, so automatically so based on the income level or based on the activity of the business, then automatically the occupation could easily identify, and in this way the central editor would correct the entries. Next is what is data coding. So the data coding is always assigning the labels on the data or any of the numerical values on the data or to the data so that the analysis is to be done smoothly and the organization could easily identify the data or the values for the further analysis. These codes is always helps the researchers that how they will categorize the information, the data, how they will identify the patterns so that they can summarize the finding, the results in or her research study. For example, survey responses like strongly or neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. If I ask the question that there is a strong relationship or a significant relationship between the education and gender, then you have to answer, you have to code it that category. That is whether if you are disagree with the statement, you can put it 2. If you strongly disagree, you can put it 5. So this is how the data coding is to be done. So if I am the respondent and I have to answer this question, there is a significant relationship between the education and gender. So I would agree is a strongly agree. So I will just mark on 5, and 5 is a coding of my response with their respective statement, and that's called data coding. So these are the types of coding. So numerical coding, assigning numerical values to categories or the variables. Let's take an example to understand more about these codings. In a survey where satisfy is rated on a scale of 5 or scale of 1 to 5, you can see when you go to the restaurant and have finished your dinner, there is a feedback form is to be asked about the services, about the food, whether you are satisfied or dissatisfied about the services or about the food. So they will ask your responses in terms of coding 1 to 5. So automatically, if one it's for very dissatisfied, two for the dissatisfied, three for the neutral, fourth is a satisfied, and fifth is a very satisfied. So if you are happy with the food, with the services, you just answer, and according you just tick the answer, and we as a researcher, we just coding your responses immediately on the Excel sheet. So this is called a numerical coding. Next one is determinist coding, when you assigning any binary code like 0 or 1 to the any of the data variables or any of the data items, that becomes the dichotomous coding. Let's take gender, and gender is classified into male, female, transgender, or other. Let's have a coding in binary codes. 0 is 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can put it 0 for males, females for one, second for transgender, third for others. So this is called the determinist coding. So such coding is always being designed and assigned in the demographic variables, and of course with the objective based questionnaires as well of your research study. Next one is ordinal coding. Ordinal coding is assigning categories in a specific order. Like for example, in a survey of satisfaction level, we are just coding the categories like one for very dissatisfied, second for frustrated, third for neutral, fourth for satisfied, fifth for very satisfied. So these are the codings where the satisfaction level of the consumers could be easily assessed. Next one is descriptive coding. Any of the assigning labels to data segmented to identify any of the key topics or figures. For example, to understand this coding, that any of the statements you have to assign a number, you have to assign a coding. So in a qualitative survey of customer feedback, services, product quality, price could be used as a descriptive codes. It could be A, it could be B, it could be C, it could be D. And such descriptive codes could be suggested by the Chatham Mill, who is a psychologist, who is a statistician, mathematicians, who always work on the qualitative studies where they generate the various codes alphabetically or descriptively, where if any of the statement has been given, there is a four options has been given, and accordingly the codings could be done through alphabetically, and that to be based on the Chatham Mill. So this is called a descriptive coding. Let's have an example to more understand demographic very profiled questionnaires. Instructions already been given. If we talk about age, we have assigned, we have choose the options under age, and now the coding begins. It's alphabetical A, B, C, D, E, F. You can also use the numbers also 1, 2, 3, 4. As we are not using the number because the questions is already in numbers, so we can put that options into the alphabetical order. Next is gender. Gender is like A, B, C, D, whatever the options are available. Same for the ethnicities, whatever the options are available, we just code alphabetically. We cannot code numerically because the questions are in the numerical way, numerical codes. highest level of education completed. If you took up these variables options, it also been coding in the alphabetical order. It doesn't mean that okay, the numerical coding is through the numerical only. It could be done through a non-numerical, which is called a descriptive coding. So these are the descriptive coding where the alphabetical order has coding has been done. Employment status, employed full-time, employed part-time, alphabetical order has been done. Now, this is called the another version of the various types of the coding, data coding. So these rating scales offers you 5 response options. If you go for a shopping experience, if you go for a dinner in a restaurant, so automatically a ranging of options are available, that is very satisfied, dissatisfied, neutral, satisfied, very satisfied. Now it is our task to give the codes to these options. Very satisfied, we can talk about very dissatisfied, we can talk about one code. We have coded one on very for very dissatisfied. Dissatisfied is 4, neutral is 3, satisfied is 2, and very satisfied is 1. So these are the aspects of the or parameters through which your shopping experience could be assessed, and through these options. So if you have filled up, so definitely that is the code, that is the responses or data that we had it from the respondents or the consumers to assess the shopping experience, and how we do the coding and analyze the data in a tabulated form. This is also another, you can say, version of the coding of data. It's typically include the 5 smiley faces. Is a frowning is a face is 1, and the big smiling face is 5. It represents the varying degree of satisfaction. So this is also the pictorial or the form of representing the options in the various on the various questions as well. So please rate your overall experience with our website. So these are the options, and we just coding them all of the options through the pictorial manner. So if we talk about the frowning face is 1, crying face is 2, being silent, and that is 3. Keep you can say laughing. Let's talk about that is 4th, and the 5th is big smiling face. So this is how we can code the pictorial form, and then we can entries into the Excel sheet, and then we analyze it. This is also another version of the questions where the coding is done into numerical codes. So how satisfied are you with your experience? Where the 1 is the least satisfied and the 5th is the most satisfied. So automatically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has been given. Least satisfied, very least satisfied, neutral, satisfied, and most satisfied. So this is how we can share our experience. Next is how interested are you in trying innovative product features? Number 1 is not at all interested, and the 5th one is very interested. So automatically 3rd is a neutral, 4th is a interested, and 2nd is a not interested. So this is how you can show your interest level when you are trying out any innovative product in a shopping complex, in a stores, etc. So this is a way that how these coding has been done, and options has been you can say developed, and accordingly it is our research, it is a researcher job that how you will code these responses so that the data could be analyzed smoothly. Next is classification of data. So what is the classification of data? So data classification is a process of organizing data into groups. That how the researcher organize data and turn into a groups based on the correct or based on their characteristics, attributes, etc. So automatically it will help the data to understand, to analyze, and how to compare that data with their respective characteristics and the attributes. For example, if we classify a group of students by their age, by their gender, by their academic specialization, that's become the classification of data. So the main purpose is how to simplify the large amount of data by grouping the various items of variables together. So let's talk about the examples categorizing a customer data. It to be categorize the data based on their demographic variables like age, location, income, their purchasing history, their occupation, their income level, their preferred locations, locations, their preferred products as well. Organizing product information, you can easily classify the product type or any of the category, the manufacturer, so that the customer can find and they can easily look what they are looking for. Dividing the employee data. So if you to look up any of the data, that how you will divide the large employee data, definitely you can classify into their characteristics or attributes like department, like HR human resource people, or the department or the persons who are involved in they do such work. They will classify the employee data into their characteristics, into their attributes. So these are attributes: the department, name of the department, their job title, their year of experience, etc. Classifying the financial information, you could also group the financial transactions by their type, their source, their date, the concerned person name, any of the name where where the bank, which bank has been involved in. So if you are classifying the financial information based on a type, source, date, amount of payment, etc., that becomes the classification of data. Modes and types of classification: geographical, chronological, qualitative, numerical. So geographical is based on the area and region wise, chronological based on the temporal, historical with respect to the time period, and the qualitative is based on the character or the attributes, and the numerical, that is quantitative, is based on the magnitude. So this is an example. So if you look up the example of geographical, where the reasons has been shown, and the with their respective reason, the production of pulses in kg has been given. So this is an example of the geographical, where any data that you can create or any categories you can create based on the reasons. These are the reasons you can make up prepare a data sheet based on the states, based on the countries, about the production of pulses, about the production of wheat, about the rainfall, etc. Chronological classification of data, we always talk about the time period where you can show and prepare the data sheet based on the time period. You can take one variable and just show that variable in with their respective years. If we talk about the rainfall with the respective years in 2016 to 2020, and what was the amount of rainfall has been estimated, that will be given in numbers, and that's called the chronological classification of data. Next one is qualitative classification of data. The classification of data is totally according to their characteristics and attributes, and that's called the qualitative classification of data. We always talk about those variables who are very qualitative in nature, which is somehow we need to calculate in terms of the percentage, in terms of the frequencies, and that attribute, that qualities, we always term as a qualitative classification of data, like gender, honesty, hair color, literacy level, intelligence level, religion, you can say occupation, etc. About their friendship levels, etc. So basically, qualitative are main classified into two main parts: simple classification of data, manifold classification of data. And this is an example that I have shown up to you in the screen. That is gender, which is main classified into male and female. That's called a simple classification of data of a qualitative classification. So if we put it gender, and gender are classified into two main parts or four main parts like male, female. In the diagram, it shows male and female. If I look up the another version, the gender are classified into four main categories: male, female, transgender, and other. Then accordingly, this is called simple classification of data. But when we categorize more into female, more into male, based on other characteristics or other attributes, it becomes manifold classification of data. Like we have already done simple classification of data, and then under the symbol, if you have categorized more, it becomes manifold classification of data. So when we talk about male, we talk about their literacy level, the literate, illiterate, female, literate, or illiterate. So this becomes the manifold classification of data. And the overall chart is called qualitative classification of data. So this is a simple classification of data where the, like for example, if a student population has to be analyzed based on their educational qualification, we just classify into educational, educated or uneducated. Then accordingly, we can also further classify it into elementary level of education or higher education. That could be done accordingly. Manifold, as I already showed to you, when any of the data, large amount data has been classified according to the attributes, then again the further two groups is to be made on. Like if we talk about male and female, another categories has been put on. Like for the male, it's illiterate or illiterate. Same for the females, and that becomes manifold classification of data. Quantitative classification of data, we always talk about the numbers, we always talk about the units, we always talk about the figures. That's become the quantitative classification of data, where a researcher is either estimated or operating on such variables which are in quantitative in nature, which are numerical based. So quantitative type of variable can be calculated, can be measured, can be operated with it with the respective scale, that is a numerical scale, or relate to the any particular information. So the quantitative data are classified into two types: discrete and continuous. Discrete quantitative data are basically those variables which can easily counted, which have a finite fixed amount. For example, if we talk about the x variable, we can take up 1 to 10 numerical codes or values. It becomes discrete quantitative data points. When we talk about the data which can be measured and have any value under the continuous, which is a infinite amounts, right? It becomes continuous quantitative data. So there is a main differences. Discrete is a finite and continuous is an infinite amounts of data. So discrete quantitative data example, number of learners in a class. It's a finite amount. If the university has decided in a class there are 60 students, this is a finite fixed amount. So this becomes a discrete quantitative data example. The total amount of data saved on a pen drive. If pen drive told us that only the 6 GB has been the data is to be stored in that pen drive. So 6 GB is a finite fixed amount. It becomes the discrete quantitative data example. Continuous quantitative data, temperature of every day in summer. It keeps on changing, it's not fixed. The weight of every character on a train, it keeps on changing. The passengers, it keeps on changing. Time to time, they're changing their seats. Who will come to this seat? Who will come to the another seat? And again, the changes occur. That becomes a continuous quantitative data that you have to measure it again and again. You have to measure if the one, if another group of person, then you have to continue with another group of persons for the measurements. Next one is tabulation of data. So the tabulation of data involves how you organize the information in the structured tables and just showing up the visual aids, how you present the data using this tabulation figures. So tables are used to arrange the data in rows and columns, while visual representation of data, it could be done through the graphs, charts, so that it helps to illustrate the trends and relationships between the variables. So this is a format of the table, that is table number, title, the stumps, we talk about the row heading, captions, we talk about the column heading, and under the columns heading, we talk about the subheadings in the column, subheadings in second subheading, then same for the row entries with respective in the sub row entries. Then whatever the values or data is to be written down on the table, that would be the body content of the table, then the total of rows, numbers, and total of columns. Then if you want to write any source node like footnote, then any source of data, any name, you can write it down on the end of the table. So this is the format of the tables. These are the characteristics of tabulation and presentation. Clarity should be there. Simple to make the simple table and present the table. That table, it should be in a very simple manner. Accuracy and precision is to be done. Whatever the errors is to be found, if any errors occurred and you have found it, make it free from errors and just make them reliable and valid. Logical organization, make the table like this that a researcher can easily compare it together. So that's it for today. Thank you for listening to this lecture. I will come up to the more and more interesting and important topics in the upcoming sessions. So till time, thank you so much for listening and namaste to all.